Hey everyone, Phreak here with some LOR content for YouTube. This is something that I really wanted to do, and I've been waiting for the game to finally come out to do it. I plan on engaging super deeply for a long time with Legends of Runeterra, and I think it's really interesting to have some kind of a time capsule. To have something that I can look back on and say, wow, I was so right or I was so wrong back then. One of my absolute favorite time capsule moments from League of Legends is in like 2011 or 2012. Around then, Doublelift says, because like the Korean server is just coming online, he's asked like, hey, the Koreans dominated in StarCraft. They're good at so many other games. Are they going to take over League of Legends? And he's like, nah, we've already got this like 2-3 year head start. They're never going to catch up. By 2013, Korea is definitively the best region in the world. And it's not close. And they were already number 2 by the end of 2012. Arguably number 1, but they got upset in the finals. But whatever, right? But it was a really compelling time capsule moment because then we saw 5 or 6 straight years of South Korean teams winning the world championship. I want to be Doublelift in this regard. I would love to be wrong about these things, but I want to put my thoughts down immortally on the internet so I can look back in a month, 2 months, year, 2 years, somewhere down the line and say, how close was I? How not close was I? I encourage all of you to leave your time capsule moments in the comments, send them out on Twitter, make your own videos. I don't know. Go wild. Okay. So I spent like 5 minutes prepping this video, jotting down some questions that I thought would be thought provoking. Didn't want to overthink it. So question number 1, are any of the regions OP? One thing I have been doing in the I'm going to call it the off season, waiting for the game to come out, is watching a lot of Swim YouTube videos. If you don't know Swim, I'll probably link his channel in the description below. I think he's a really great content creator. Very good card game player. He thinks Shadow Isles is basically mandatory. So the question is, are any regions OP or are any regions underpowered? I think Shadow Isles is definitely a top tier region. I think it can fit in almost every deck. I think there's a lot of really good cards there. But I'm willing to bet that there's going to be, this is very weak praise, at least one top tier deck that doesn't have Shadow Isles in it. In fact, I am certain there's at least one top tier deck without Shadow Isles in it. The real question is, how many are there? Like, what percentage of like the top tier Masters metagame has Shadow Isles in it? If it's purely random chance, it should be about 1/3. Because of dual regions, that's like roughly accurate, I think. Maybe I'm trolling, whatever. More than 1/6 because we're not doing only single color, right? So it's somewhere around there, whatever. I'm getting a little off topic. Anyway, I think Shadow Isles will be be contained in less than half of top tier decks, right? And this will be people making Reddit posts or Twitter posts or whatever saying, I hit master tier, here's my deck list. Of those, less than half will have Shadow Isles in it. So I'm gonna make that prediction, and almost just to disagree with Swim. But I don't know. Maybe it is OP. I'm just gonna say it's not. But I'm certain there are top tier decks that definitely don't run Shadow Isles. The next question I gave myself is, are all the playstyles viable? Control, mid-range, and aggro are the general big 3, right? Fast, medium, and slow. Not in that order. Absolutely yes. I did really well in the first preview patch of the ranked season, doing mostly mid-range stuff and control stuff. I didn't play a lot of fast aggro. I played a little bit, but not a ton. Through requests, I played like some Yasuo decks, which are generally pretty control as well, mid-range to control. I am very confident that every playstyle is viable. Now, I will say that the world first to master tier is going to be playing aggro. Anytime you're in a new season environment and you're rushing for number 1, you're rushing for the highest MMR, the faster you win games, the better. Even if your win rate is 70% instead of 75% because the deck isn't as good, doesn't matter. Getting plus 20 wins in an hour is better than getting plus 25 wins in an hour and a half. So yeah, that's going to be the case, right? The world first master is going to be an aggro deck. I'm going to go ahead and predict what that's going to be. I'm going to guess Mono Noxus. Mono Noxus using the Allegiance card, the Basilisk Rider, just going super hard, right? They're going to either use wild cards or get somewhat lucky and get 2 copies of Katarina. That's probably going to be the first deck to hit Master Tier. I'm going to guess that's the one. Just the fastest deck you can make is probably Mono Noxus. There are other decks that are going to follow suit right afterwards. It might be that people clue into this and people start running anti-aggro decks because the ladder is aggro heavy. That could be done. We'll see what happens. But that's my prediction. That's what's going to be doing it. All right. But the thought-provoking question for me is there, or what is the way to build a deck? Is there like an overarching principle that defines deck building? Honestly, I think it's you need to be able to play a card by turn 3, right? You can bank on 1 and 2, and this is fine. I don't think that will ever not be true. You are allowed to skip on 1 and 2, almost no matter what. I think that's going to be true. There are punishes out there, but I don't think it's often enough that it's going to be a big deal. But the way to build a deck, I mean, it's have a win condition in mind, right? So to me, like, and one thing I want to actually be clear about is I've never been a super top tier card game player. I think I'm very good at LOR, and I'm interested to see if I can stack up against a lot of, like, you know, big heavyweights who come from other titles. I have hit Legend to Hearthstone before, like, not #1 Legend, you know, but like I was pretty good. That doesn't mean I'm amazing, right? But I was like pretty good. So like I'm actually very curious to see like what my relatively novice opinions are and how they match up with people who have more experience than me in this sphere. Yeah, I was a very bad Magic the Gathering player. I played that a fair bit. So okay, the way to build a deck. To me, there's like 2 things in my head that I don't know which one is true, and this is maybe because I'm a newbie. One is, you know, do you go, you know, all in? And by all in, I mean like 80% on a strategy, right? Like if you're playing a Karina Varaza spell deck, you need to just have mostly spells in the deck to make Karina reliable. And so you have to constrain your deck around this, and you have to play it in that way, and you know, you have to make those things reliably happen. Okay. And then the other 20% of your deck is like ways to survive bad matchups that exist. So what I'm, I guess, trying to wrap my head around is how single-minded can your deck be? Like, can you draft pure Smork, faces the place aggro, slam that into constructed, and nope, I'm not gonna run, you know, transfusion so that a unit survives against avalanche. I'm gonna put in another decimate to kill the nexus, right? Like, is that the right way to build the deck? Is to be really, 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 really focused, or is it much more around your deck needs to be much more general because you need to be able to have a good win rate in almost all matchups? Or do you just take the L and have like 1 or 2 matchups that's just 10-90 and you just lose every time, right? The example from Hearthstone is Freeze Mage loses to Control Warrior. This is a very old example, but that was like a 90-10 matchup in favor of the Control Warrior. And Freeze Mage just needed to dodge the matchup. And generally, you didn't try to make Freeze Mage win that matchup more by throwing at other things. You just took the L and moved on, and you were good in your other matchups, right? And that's the thought that I'm putting out here, right? Is how often can you have decks that just take the loss? You're like, yep, I am never going to make this matchup work, so I'm just not going to bother, and I'm going to hope that I only hit it 10% of the time, and it's going to work out in the end. Can one of those decks be good and top tier of the ladder? I'm going to say yes, because, you know, those kinds of decks that they're going to lose to should be rare enough. But I am curious, right? How many top-end decks, people who get, you know, top 10 and stay there on the ladder, how well-rounded are their decks, right? To have less bad matchups. I think that's going to be likely. I think we're going to see because I think there's a lot of interplay in LOR that I think you can't just, you know, in the Smork case, just Smork them down before they can do anything. I think top tier decks will have to continually change their deck contents, you know, to the tune of like 4 or 5 cards, which is, you know, a tenth of the deck. That's not meaningless. Pretty reliably, pretty consistently. No idea if that's true. Honestly, that's probably common in other card games anyway, and I'm just like, what about this thing that every card game has? Again, I don't know if that's even true. But that's the point I'm going to bring out, is that a top-tier deck is going to need to, you know, sideboard about 4 to 5 cards on a weekly basis because of meta shifts. Maybe I'm right. Let's see. All right, are there any absolute truths? Are there any absolute truths in LOR? Um, and similarly, are there any absolute falsehoods? Um, I think you must be able to play a card by round three. Um, I, I would be shocked to see a deck that just chose to just waste all their round three mana. Um, you can skip 1 and 2 and bank spell mana and then play a thing on 3 with 6 spell mana. I think that's fine. But absolute truths. Um, I know it seems to be true that you don't need to run champions. Right? There are decks where their archetype does not line up with any of the champions currently in the game. And so their playstyle would be watered down by adding an Elise or a Teemo or a Fiora. I think that is going to remain true for probably this game's lifetime. There will be, in most cases, at least one tier 1 deck that doesn't run a champion because it's just not that kind of play style. It's a Karina Veraza deck, and you know what? You just don't want to have those champions because you really don't want to draw them when you go off with the spell. You're only running, Babbling Bjerg or whatever, right? Or something to that effect. I think that kind of thing will absolutely exist. Any other absolute truths I think are out there? And I'm going to actually expand this a little bit into rules of thumb. Are there things that are going to be super commonly recommended, and will that remain true? Right now, one of the things that's definitely popularly espoused is when it's your turn to attack, you attack at the start of the round. More often than not. I think this is going to be advice that exists right now, and it will go away over time. So the basic idea is, if you ever have board control, if you're in a spot where literally attacking is suicide, obviously you don't attack. But if you're the aggressive deck, in most rounds, I feel like the advice is typically swing at the start of the round, from rounds 4 onwards, roughly, right? Round 1, obviously you must play a unit. Round 2, you probably want to play a unit. But from 4 onwards, 5 onwards, you get in a spot where you're like, I'm now afraid of Avalanche, or maybe even Winter's Breath or something, some kind of board control tool, or some kind of very scary minion that gets plopped onto the ground. That seems to be, and I'm going to just keep quoting Swim because he's the most prolific content creator of this giant offseason between preview patches. So he's where all my talking points come from. I think that is going to be recommended now. I think that will go away over time. Now, there's still going to be decks where that's the right play, right? Where they actually really, really want to play on 3, and then round 3 ends and they just swing at the top of 4. Maybe they played Zed after, mana was tapped, and so they don't want to give you a chance to play, the Freljord Archer that freezes you when it comes down to the board. But I can absolutely see a good, solid deck that's it's 6. I'm going to spend 6 mana on a minion, and we're going to swing with it. And if you have Vengeance, sucks to be me. And just make them have it, that kind of thing. I can see that happening. So that's my prediction, right? Is that that open attacking, as it's phrased, right now is overrated. We'll see if that's true or not. For now, I'm going to make the call that it's true right now. Sort of next question that I wrote for myself is, are there any cards that are problematic? Anything that's super overtuned, that's too good? I'll keep quoting Swim. Back to back is getting tossed around a lot. 5 mana, give 2 different units on your side, +3/+3. Burst speed. This really means that almost any meaningful combat round, if you open attack, you have the mana for back to back. If they try to Mystic Shot you, you can counter it that way. If they throw up a good block, you counter it that way. As good on defense. Is that card too good? Yeah, I could see it. I mean, the case is being made, and I can see that happening. To me, I don't know. One thing that's going to be interesting is, this happens in League of Legends as well, is as players get better, they have different problems. Because some things are beaten by just simply skill. So I think, for example, we talk about problematic cards. I actually think that She Who Wanders, which is the big 9 or 10 mana Freljord minion that obliterates a whole bunch of cards, and it was obliterate anything with 4 or less attack in play or in hand. It got nerfed to only obliterate non-champions. So it wouldn't get rid of like a level 1 Fiora or a level 1 Katarina or Zed or Draven or Braum, etc. I'm just like listing low attack champions for some reason. I don't think that card is actually a problem, because if you were in a game state where you still had a bunch of cheap minions and it was round 10, you had lost anyway because your aggro failed to play off or pay off. Like that card could probably be reverted. And again, I could totally be wrong. We could look back a week from now and say, no, She Who Wanders is actually still overpowered. You know what? That might be true, but I'm going to go ahead and make the prediction that you could revert She Who Wanders and she would be a weak card in a developed metagame where people have good decks, right? People were mostly coming into LOR blind, not knowing how to make good decks, so the decks were obviously not tuned very well. The aggro was, missing the right curve. It was hitting the wrong cards. It was playing the wrong champions. It was maybe in the wrong factions. Lo and behold, you kill your opponent 2 rounds slower, She Who Wanders comes out. That's just how that works. Sure, the control decks playing that card could also get better over time, but in general, we're going to see more turn or round 4, round 5 kills than we were in the first preview patch when, the card got nerfed. So that's my prediction in terms of problematic cards. Is there anything else that's too good? I mean, I think Hecarim is really incredible. I don't think he's so good that he's dictating that everyone must play ephemeral aggro or ephemeral midrange, but he's certainly very good. I don't know if he's problematic necessarily. I think Team is a cool card. I think Fiora is fine. In general, I am pretty happy with most of the cards in the game. So right now, I'll even say I don't think Deny is problematic. I think Deny is totally beatable. I think you can absolutely play around that card, and it's fine. And, one thing I was really thinking about when I was waiting for the launch of LOR, essentially, is if we're going to be in a really Ionia-heavy metagame where everyone's running 3 copies of Deny, I'm just going to make a deck with only burst speed and minions, and the minions with burst speed effects. I mean, maybe you'll deny Vladimir's hero power when he attacks, but I don't mind only playing Chain Vest and Elixir of Iron and back-to-back and stuff and, Prismatic Barrier. I can make a great deck with all the effects being burst speed, and you have 3 dead cards in your hand. There's a graph out there that shows you the odds of drawing at least 2, if you have a 3 of, by the time you've drawn 12 cards, then it's reasonably high. So we're getting to mid-game, and you have 2 dead cards in your hand that you can literally never get rid of. I'm happy to make that metagame call, right? So, I don't think Deny is going to become a huge problem. It's ultimately, I guess, the call I'm going to make there, right, is I don't think Deny is going to be a huge problem. I don't think Deny will need to be nerfed. It can certainly feel really bad when it denies you your stuff, don't get me wrong, but there's lots of ways to stuff Judgment. You frostbite her. Or, lots of ways to stuff Vengeance. You glimpse Beyond beforehand or whatever. I think there's other counterplays that aren't Deny. Yes, they're going to be control tools. Yes, there are going to be ways to prevent what your opponent wants to do. That's what an interactive card game does. Deny is simply one of those tools, and I don't think it's the strongest of them. So that's another call I'm going to make, is that Deny is not OP. It is not a problematic card. Another question I'd ask myself was, what's the first deck to hit Master? I kind of hit that already with playstyles being viable and any, the way to build a deck. For fun, I slapped together a really, really brief tier list, and because I went really fast with this, I don't have a visual aid for this. I decided to write a tier list for champions, and this doesn't have... It's not a good tier list. I actually don't stand behind this tier list because I don't really know the right way to make this tier list. Ultimately, I mean, that's just what it comes down to. I made 4 tiers, and again, I'm not really proud of this. Here's a couple ways to do the criteria. Okay, so the way I did it, and the way I wrote it down here, is my top tier are cards that you'd be happy to build around, / are core to the concept, but also work even if your core thing doesn't go off. You could give me a random deck in LOR and toss this champion in, and I'd be pretty happy with it. is one way of putting it. Now, that's not the way card games work, right? When you're playing Constructed and even Limited in this mode, because they have pretty heavy sort of tuning towards what cards you get, you play a deck to play a deck. But I'm basically using power level / how often we're going to see them because they're viable in so many different versions of a deck that to me they're S tier, because it's not just, well, here's the Heimerdinger deck. It's, well, of course we're running Zed, we're in Ionia. So there's 4 champions that are that to me: Zed, Ashe, Hecarim, and Katarina. If you're running those factions, you are probably running those champions. That's not always true, right? There's going to be exceptions to the rule, obviously. Hecarim is not in the Spider deck. He's probably not in a heavy control deck. But I think there's so many ways to play Ephemeral that there's a lot of different Hecarim decks out there that look very different. I guess I'm kind of saying that there are 3 different decks that this champion is in, and I think that is true in these cases. There's lots of ways to play aggro that includes Noxus. They're all going to include Katarina. Zed's just great always. Ashe is just great always as you're playing hard control. And even then, there's hard control of the Frostbite version where you're running Ashe. Those are champions that we're going to see in lots of different decks. Then I go to tier 2, where these are good champions that are less necessary, ultimately. They are, again, generally powerful. I think you will see them in lots of decks. They are, I mean, in some cases, they actually are your win condition, but I think these champions are more narrow. They are, essentially, they're in fewer decks, and they are Elise, Lucian, Draven, Tryndamere, and Fiora. That is my tier 2 of champions. Tryndamere got nerfed in the most recent patch, doesn't have tough when he's level 2 anymore, which I think is a very good change. I think level 2 Tryndamere was like way too frustrating otherwise, already had 9 health and had to die twice. So I think it's a good change just for the health of that card to be less frustrating. But again, it's just mostly these are champions that it's interesting because obviously Fiora can be her own win condition. Like Fiora can literally outright win you the game in her champion text. Literally ends the game. But to me, 3/3 Challenger is good. She can threaten a lot of things, but I think as time goes on, 3/3 Challenger and XD I might win is going to go down in power because people are going to get better at removing the right things, understanding what tools Fiora decks actually run, right? Like, once you start to know what the refined deck lists are, and you're like, actually, none of the Fiora decks run Ionia anymore, so there's no barrier to play around. So there's really only 2 tools left. You can start to play around that kind of stuff. It's like, actually, I'm going to leave up your Avaros and Sentry so you can't play back-to-back. Or not back-to-back, sorry. You can't play stand-alone anymore. It's like, well, suddenly you get in a really interesting spot. Like, people are going to have more single-target removal. And if they're not running Ionia, then they don't have Deny. I don't see Fiora remaining a Tier 1 champion for very long. Maybe I'm wrong. Again, looking at Elise, Draven, Lucian, Tryndamere, I think they're all very good cards. They're going to exist a lot. They're just not as ubiquitously powerful as Zed, Ashe, Hecarim, Katarina. All right, then we go to what I'm calling Tier 3. And I'm still going to kind of point out that I think these cards are fine, but they are build-arounds. There is, like, yeah, okay, Hecarim was kind of built around. You had to play ephemeral stuff, but, like, there's, like, 17 different ways to jam ephemeral units into a Hecarim deck. It's not hard. They literally run a Shark Chariot and make 3 1/1s, and you've, like, already leveled up Hecarim by the time he attacks. It's, like, it's actually just, it's free. So on the Tier 3, though, these are going to be cards where you don't jam them into a random deck, generally speaking. You kind of have to build around them. So if you see them in the deck, you are giving away a lot of information of what is in your deck in and of itself, which is a lot of information leakage. This is an interesting thing about LOR is that LOR broadcasts your champion makeup. And so when you see a Shen or you see a Yasuo, you're like, the game told me they're playing Shen or Yasuo at the Mulligan phase. I know we're against a stun recall deck, or I know we're, like, you're going to get that information, and that's really interesting and really valuable. And because of that, I think these champions are going to be very telegraphed in their decks, and I think you can play around that play style better and come out with a higher win rate. And so what I'm kind of saying is that these champions' decks are You could probably find some tier 1 decks in there, but that would require more omniscience than I have to be like, yes, there's a tier 1 Jinx deck, and a tier 1 Ezreal deck, and a tier 1 Heimer deck, and a tier 1 Lux deck, and a tier 1 Shen deck, and a tier 1 Yasuo deck, and a tier 1 Braum deck. Those are probably not all true. But I think these champions are very narrow in what they have to do. That they are there. These are the build-around champions, right? You build a deck around these champions specifically. Some of these are going to be top-tier decks. At least one of these champions is going to be a top-tier champion. And instead of predicting which one it's going to be, maybe Hecarim was, the tier 1 that became, that was a tier 3 champion, became tier 1. I'm just coming back to Hecarim all the time. Yeah, I'm going to say these champions will have decent decks, but the vast majority of these champions will not take over the game. All right, and then I go to my tier 4, and I only think one of these champions is actually bad, and even then I'm not sure he's bad. Garen, Teemo, Kalista, Thresh, Vladimir, Anivia, and Darius. And Kalista is the biggest. I'm probably wrong here. Because Kalista is a 3-mana 6/2 fearsome, which is dumb. Like, that's so good. And she draws a card for you in the mid-game. She draws a free card for you in the mid-game. Now, it's a cheap card, but still, she does it. Kalista is very frail. She no longer deflects her damage off to her other target. Like, there's lots of ways where I could see Kalista being very bad because you just Mystic Shot her and she's dead. I mean, Zed dies in the same way, and yet Zed is absurdly good. Kalista is my biggest. I'm unsure. I could easily see a very fast aggro deck slamming Kalista on 3, getting 6 power on the board for 3 mana. By the way, Kallista's fearsome. She's not getting chump blocked. You better have 3 attack to block her. Most things with 3 attack already cost 3 mana, so she's trading for equal mana cost. And if you sequence your plays correctly, her +2 attack minion hits before that. This is a lot of power swinging at you very, very quickly. Could very cleanly take over the game with this kind of stuff. And if you don't block her, or you think you can just Mystic Shot, and you just slam, Mark of the Isles, +3/+3 ephemeral, she hits for 7, her teammate hits for +2, that's 9 damage, and it costs you barely any mana. It costs you 4. And you still went 2 for, only 1 for 2 on cards. That's great mana to damage value, right? So Kalista's my biggest. Maybe I'm wrong about this one. She could easily be the absolute star of a very fast aggro deck. I could see Kalista Braum actually just taking over games. Like, you just play Kalista on 4 and Braum just kills things. Like, maybe that's just a deck, That's possible. Maybe, you're actually a really heavy elusive archetype and you just throw Kalista in there because it gives people 2 attack and it's actually just worth it somehow. Maybe, right? Or there's a really good way to abuse the on attack. Like, maybe you can have her see 3 allies die before she even attacks the first time, and she's revived something with a really stupid on play effect or on summon effect. Like, there's probably some stupid combo out there for Kalista, which is why it's the biggest question mark. I just don't know where it is. So for now, she's in the bottom tier. Garen, I think, is just a little bit too simple. 5/5 regen for 5 is not a bad card. The level up is quite good. It's not even that hard to get to. It's strike twice. But I'm just basically not betting on mid-range Demacia being that good in the long run, right? This is not my, hey, it's week 1, day 2 meta guide. It's, hey, we're a month in. It's about time for maybe their next balance patch. And it's like, well, here's buffs to Garen and Kalista. And I'm like, I called it. Maybe not, right? Maybe they're nerfing them because they're broken, and I'm wrong. This is why I'm doing the time capsule. I want to be wrong about stuff. I think it's interesting. Drink some water real quick. I would love to be wrong about stuff. I'm happy to be wrong about stuff. And actually, please, I would love to do more time capsules. Ask me other questions, and I will make an instant day 2 or day 3 video where I'm like, here's other things I think are true about LOR, and I can be wrong in 6 months. I'm down for that. Please give me those questions. Okay. Other champions that are weak on the scale. Teemo. Teemo is interesting. He is fun. He is exciting. Again, there might be a top-end deck that just happens to run Teemo in there, but I think Teemo is a little too particular. I think he's a well-designed card. When you see Teemo get played, you know exactly what he's about. I love it. I think Teemo is an incredibly well-designed card. I don't think he is an incredibly strong card. On the spectrum of champions, I think he is one of the very weakest champions in the game. Yeah. Yeah, we're going to move on. Thresh, another one that I think is at the very bottom end here. He's solid, right? He can challenge things and kill them, and then he can, drag a champion out of your deck. The most obvious example would be Tryndamere, who's really expensive. I have Trynd here at tier 2 and Thresh here at tier 4, and, maybe Thresh Trynd is a top tier deck, and they just win the game on, like, round 7, and because they have really, really good stabilizing factions, regions, they never die to aggro, and then they win the game on, like, round 7 with pulling in a Tryndamere way too early. Might be a top tier deck. Certainly is possible. Excuse me. Certainly possible. Next up is Vladimir. For what I've seen, the Vladimir Scars deck just does not seem to perform, quite to the top level. I do want to point out that this is for constructed overall. There are very specific tuning levers available in expeditions where they can make card buckets more concise, that you get a very refined deck list. Like, if Vladimir Scars is bad, they can make it good and limited by just ensuring you only see Crimson units when you draft Vladimir and Braum. And you just never see stuff that's just filler and generic and bad. It's just all on point, and you get, like, if Transfusion was a great card, there'd be 6 Transfusions in the deck, So none of this affects limited at all, because it's its own game mode, very much so. I don't think Scars is going to be a top tier deck in constructed, and I think Vladimir only exists in Scars. It's possible that we actually see Vladimir as the top end of a random mid-range deck, and you're like, yep, we're running Demacia plus Noxus mid-range. We're using Trifarian Assessor to draw 3 cards, probably only 2 cards. And then, you know what? Round, 8 comes out, we got to finish the game. Vlad comes down, already leveled up, and swings and just adds 5 damage on top. It's too much to handle, sorry. We threw a Might down, suddenly we've got, Trample on, or Overwhelm on, one random character, and we got over the top. And Vlad's my, one of finishing tool. And the deck wouldn't work without him. Might be true. Down the line, next in the line, Anivia. Of course, Anivia got nerfed. This patch. Anivia is, a 7-drop now, a 7-mana 2/4. And the egg doesn't revive until you're enlightened. And they also nerfed all the enlightened cards. So it's very hard. It's comparatively harder to get to 10 mana. One of the very first decks I really ground a lot of games on was Shadow Owl's Anivia. Hope you high roll and you get 2 Oblivious Islanders for a round 4 Anivia who then levels up. That was broken. I understand that. I get how frustrating Anivia was. Old Anivia was a stronger card than Teemo and a way more frustrating card than Teemo. I understand the card getting changed. In this patch, I don't think Anivia is good anymore. Could well be wrong, but that's my guess, is that Anivia doesn't really find a home. And the last card I'm going to bring up is Darius. Darius is definitely ugly on the surface. He's a 6-mana 6/5 Overwhelm, which is not great. A comparison, we're going to bring back Swim. He brings up Hecarim. Hecarim is a 6-mana 4/6 Overwhelm, but when you're using Overwhelm, aka attacking, you get 2 Spectral Riders, so he's kind of a 10/6. Darius is only a 10/6 when he levels up. So I see it, right? The one thing I will say for Darius is that I think it's okay to run 3 of Darius as your absolute top end, as your finisher in Noxus aggro. On round 6, you play Darius. Darius is maybe already leveled up. Who knows? But he swings. He hits for some damage. You get your opponent down to 8 health. Next round turns over. The other 2 Dariuses in your hand turn into Decimate. And because it's round 7 and you banked 3 spell mana, you Decimate for lethal. That is the context through which I think Darius is good. I think more than maybe literally any other champion in the game, I think number 1, maybe even more so than Karma, maybe even more than Heimerdinger. That's a tough sell. Darius may well have the single best champion to champion card synergy, champion spell synergy in the game. He comes down as the finisher and gives you more finishers. That is really, really tight theming. And I don't mean that as like, oh, how flavorful. It's like, no. You cannot draw too many Dariuses. You can definitely draw too many Trindamirs. I mean, definitely draw too many Trindamirs. Lux's spell is, I mean, it kind of fits the Lux archetype. It keeps her alive. It's fine, but like, yeah, it's a spell because everything's a spell and Lux wants to cast spells, but it's not the same. Yasuo's spell only works when you're on defense, right? Like, there's a lot going on here that legitimately, yeah, maybe you really don't need. Elise is very good as well, of course. And Elise is pretty high tier. But that's my sort of tier list. I think I skipped over it really quickly. Tier 3 was Ezreal, Jinx, Heimerdinger, Lux, Shen, Yasuo, Braum. Yeah, I don't think you slam Braum into a random Freljord deck. You've got to do some pretty heavy theming around him. And you can, then it's probably going to be pretty good, but that's where we are. All right, so that's my bold champion prediction. One other note I gave myself is I think there's going to be undiscovered decks that, some people are going to call them meta solved, and they're going to be like, this champion's too strong, this champion's too weak, this deck is unplayable, this deck is what everyone should play. And in a week, that's going to change again, and there's going to be whole new things that are true. And I encourage you all to time capsule yourselves and hold yourselves honest to what you think is true and then shows up not to be, because that's very interesting. Overall, again, I want to document the learning of this game. I want to document what I think now and what becomes true in the future, because that's very compelling content to me, to see where I was right and see where I was wrong, to see where you were right and you were wrong. As one final thing, I am declaring a blood feud. I am declaring a blood feud with Swim. I have nothing against him. Please do not go and flame this man. He does not deserve your flame. Do not do this in my name. However, I am declaring a blood feud. All right? It's like the original Pokemon series, and one of us is Ash, and one of us is Gary. And when Swim comes back to you, when you talk to him about this blood feud, and he says, who is this Phreak guy? That means he's Gary. His head's in the clouds. He doesn't see the challenger, the scrappy young buck coming for him. I am Ash Ketchum, and I will catch them all. And Swim, I am coming for you. For no other reason than because you're the only other person who makes LOR content right now. Bring it. Thanks for watching, everyone. Play your 3 expedition runs as soon as you can, make an OP deck, and rush to Master Tier with me. I'll see you at 11 a.m. on Thursday. Bye.